let's walk through example 1 of finding a second derivative. So recall that d squared y dx squared for a parametric equation, or system of equations rather, is d dt of your first derivative, dy dx, divided by dx dt. So in order to find, so what we're going to do in example 1, even though I didn't expressly ask you to do it, was to find d squared y dx squared. So just like any other second derivative, we have to find the first derivative along the way. There's only a few random exceptions where that's not true, and it's always because of some specific pattern. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to find dy dx, right? So dy dx itself should be essentially my y prime of t on top of my x prime of t. So y prime of t is just a 4, because y of t was a 4t. And x prime of t should be a 2t minus a 5, because my x of t was t squared minus 5t plus 1. So that's my dy dx, and that's great. And another way to write it, if you feel more comfortable, is to write it as a 2t minus 5 to the negative first. That's also fine. I don't care. But then I'm actually asked to find d squared y dx squared, right? That's going to mean that I derive with respect to t the answer I've already gotten, that 4 divided by 2t minus 5. And then I do the derivative of x again, right? So the x prime of t, which we already know what x prime of t is because we've already done it. So I'm already going to have that x prime of t on the bottom, right? So when I derive this, whether you treat it as a quotient rule, right? Low d high minus high d low, draw the line, square the low. Or if you do it as a chain rule, that's also fine. I'm going to go ahead and do this as a chain rule. So when I derive this expression, I'm going to get a negative 4, 2t minus 5 to the negative second times a 2 because of the chain, right? And on the bottom, I'm going to get an x prime of t. Well, we already found x prime of t once. It was a 2t minus 5. So when I clean this up, I end up with a negative 8 on top of what seems to be 3 of these 2t minus 5s. So a negative 8 over the quantity 2t minus 5 to the third, and that's my d squared y dx squared.